Hello, and welcome to the Incomplete Guide to Film podcast, where we're learning filmmaking together. I'm your host, Alex Pinnell, and today we're going to be talking about a lot of stuff. So, Comicon just ended, obviously, which means a lot of stuff for a lot of the movie industry, especially the big budget films. You know, a lot of trailers came out this week, and just a lot of news of any kind, because Ghostbusters came out and people thought that it was fine. It was okay, let's talk about Ghostbusters. I wasn't going to talk about Ghostbusters, but now we're going to talk about Ghostbusters. Here's the deal. I don't like that there's a reboot. Doesn't matter that it's women. Everyone wants to make it, oh, you're sexist, you're misogynist. You don't think that women can pull off these roles. No, I think that you shouldn't touch it. I think that you shouldn't touch Ghostbusters. If they were making Back to the Future, even if it was Michael J. Fox, somehow reprising his role or playing the dad or something like that, if the same people were involved, I wouldn't want them to remake it because it's just so magical the first time. There are some franchises that can do with a remake. Horror remakes I have no problem with because horror movies aren't that deep to begin with, most of them. So, horror remakes, fine, do it. They're going to do a Saw remake. Saw came out in 2004. Okay, 10 years seems to be all it takes for people to start clamoring for a reboot. It's ridiculous how quickly that happened, or how Spider-Man got remade twice now. I mean, he got 2/3 of the way through his last trilogy, so I mean, it's time for a reboot. But that was changing ownership and all that stuff. So that's how that all worked. But the whole thing is claiming that I'm certain that people didn't like Ghostbusters because it was women. I'm absolutely certain of that. People are like that sometimes. People in general suck, okay? People in their basest state are horrible. They're selfish, horrible people. Sure. But I'm going to tell you that 80% of the people who are saying, no, don't remake Ghostbusters, is because they love that movie and they don't want another installment. It's not because they have a black lady on there. It's not because they're women. It's taking something that we loved and just kind of twisting it. Even if it was Dan Aykroyd and Bill Murray bringing in a new cast, like how they did Force Awakens, where they have the old cast kind of bringing a new cast into it. Even if it was like that, I really wouldn't want them to touch it, because it's a reboot. It's not a it's a remake. It's not a sequel. If it was a sequel, I might be okay with it. I was a little sketchy about Force Awakens, like we've talked about before, but it ended up being great, so I might have given it a chance. But honestly, I'm not going to see Ghostbusters. I'm not even going to tender a viewing with this movie in protest. It's not going to be a big thing because they've already made their money. Though I don't think that they've made their budget back yet, and it's been a week or two. So, the audience chooses with their wallets. And of course, they're going to say, oh, the misogynists won. They won. They got everybody to not go to the movie, and people are just sexist pigs. No. You made a remake, and it didn't go off very well. That's what happened. And remakes don't usually go off very well. It's a quick cash grab. That's that's all it is. It's, hey, let's get you in on the nostalgia. Because like Point Break that came out last year. Point Break had no business being a Point Break movie. The only thing was that there were thieves and it was extreme sports. They didn't even really do surfing or anything like that. I'm fine with them rebooting an old franchise like James Bourne is coming out, and Bourne, whatever. And, I think that's fine. That's another sequel. That's another thing like that. But I don't want to talk about this for the entire time that I have, you guys. So let's talk about something else. Just kind of a update. The Marvel Netflix stuff has gotten a lot of trailers and stuff, and it looks great. Ghost Rider is actually going to be on season 4 of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which is really cool, me being Marvel nut. Wonder Woman got a trailer. Kong Skull Island got a trailer. Justice League got a trailer. What was another one? I think that's all that I was really interested in. But I was actually surprised on the star-studded cast that's in Kong Skull Island. They've got John Goodman and Samuel L. Jackson and Tom Hiddleston, of course, which I knew, and just a ton of people. But one of the coolest things to come out of Comicon was the announcement that there is going to be a Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency TV show. Now, a lot of you may be asking, who the heck is Dirk Gently? Dirk Gently is a character created by Douglas Adams. Douglas Adams wrote the wonderful Hitchhiker's Guide trilogy of 5 books. He's very satirical. It's so much fun reading his stuff. And Dirk Gently is in the same vein. It's a detective that encounters supernatural sort of circumstances, and he's a bit neurotic. He's a bit crazy. So it's going to be crazy, zany fun. And if you can, check it out, because I'm going to be, and I think it's going to be awesome. Elijah Wood's on it, and a whole bunch of other unknowns. They haven't really been in anything. So, it should be interesting. And I'm really happy that they're bringing adaptations of Douglas Adams' work to the screen. And that his estate, his wife is actually letting that happen. Because if you guys saw the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy movie that came out in 2004 or 5, wow, it was bad. And right then, she said, I'm never going to give rights away for this stuff ever again. Though I think Dirk Gently's rights are a little weird, because BBC did something that wasn't really connected, and rights bounced around. I watched the panel, but I didn't really, it was a whole bunch of licensed stuff. Licensing is so weird with Hollywood. How licenses just bounce around and people buy stuff that they have no plans on, that they have no immediate plans on doing. Universal, I think it is, has Namor, who's basically the Marvel Aquaman. So, and they're never going to touch that, because Aquaman and Namor both suck. But it's weird how studios will just buy properties without any plans for them. They'll just spend money and have no plans for any returns for that. But that Universal is going to stick to their guns, and they're going to keep Namor, because eventually Marvel is going to run out of ideas and they need Namor. So, that's all the interesting stuff from Comic-Con. So here's another little thing that I've had bouncing around in my head for a bit, because I watched the Purge election year. Yes, I've seen all 3. Why have I seen all 3? Because it's a good idea that hasn't been executed properly yet, and I'm waiting for them to execute it properly, and they just haven't done it. But there is something in the Purge election year that I've found not necessarily disturbing, but it was something that I definitely noticed. And it's something that I think I've talked about on the podcast before, but it's political messages. In the Purge election year, basically, the country, it's America. The country is under the new founding fathers. I guess is a party or something, but it turns out that they're a cult. They're a cult who believes in murder, and that's why they have the Purge, which is the annual night on which all crimes are legal, including murder, which is apparently what people care about. That's the only thing that they really care about. And they were talking about how people are coming into the country to, from other countries to come and purge on Purge night, to go out and murder people and everything. Basically, murder tourism. That's what they call it. And they were talking about, here's the interesting thing. There's a senator who's running for president because it's election year, right? So it came out 2016, which is an election year. But they had a female senator who wanted to end the purge. That's the whole thing. Watch the trailers. I'm not telling you anything new. But my big deal is they portrayed the villains, the new founding fathers, basically as Republicans. They were basically Republicans. They talked about God a lot. They said, God sacrificed his son Jesus, and so we sacrifice others so that we can be cleansed of our sin or whatever, right? And it's this weird culty sort of logic of, hey, we murder people so that we can be cleansed of our sins. So we sin so we can be cleansed of our sins. What? Okay, whatever. But the whole thing was, you have the purge so that you can whittle down the homeless and the destitute and the poor, because they're the ones that take the hardest hit from this. So that's how we deal with the poor. We don't want to pay for them anymore. We don't want to give them welfare. We don't want to do any of that stuff. We don't want to give them health care. So and as I'm saying this, I'm sure that you can see they're making conservatives, and especially conservative Christians, the enemy, the villain, which, I kept an open mind. And I said, well, it is a horror fantasy film. It's a fictional depiction. But honestly, it... Yeah, and the whole thing was basically the Republicans were trying to kill Hillary Clinton because that's how they purported her, how she was this great crusader who was going to stop, the same way that they talk about Hillary. And they were talking about, basically the Republicans were trying to murder Hillary Clinton to keep her from the presidency because they couldn't beat her any other way. And it coming out around the same time that Hillary is under investigations for crimes that she actually did commit, but we've decided not to try her on, it's a little sappy, for one, because honestly, it felt a little more like a gimmick than, it's based on real life, rather than actual an actual political statement, and in a way, I tried to keep an open mind, but it did kind of offend me a little bit, because I'm a conservative Christian, and I don't, I'm not necessarily big on Trump. Do I think that Trump will do a better job than Hillary? Yeah, I do. So I'm going to be voting for Trump, guys. It's just, that happens. I'm not excited for Trump either, okay? Nobody really is. But you know what? Trump is better than the alternative. Because the alternative let people die in Benghazi, and she asks, why are we still talking about it? Because she hasn't been punished for it. And I don't want to get into a whole political thing, but it's important, guys. It's important. We need to respect our troops, and letting and saying, you don't get any backup, and then blaming somebody on YouTube for the Arabs getting angry and killing our, I'm not necessarily pro-war, but what happened in Benghazi? People have been killed over less. Wars have been started over way less than that. Okay? We were entirely in the right on that. We were entirely, we were attacked for no reason. They felt like they could, so they did. And we just let them do it. Guys, we just let them do it. That's not America. That's not who we are. I'm not saying that we should bully the world. I'm not saying that we should police the world and get in everybody's business. But you know what? When someone attacks our soil, because that's what a consulate is, it's our soil on their land. That's an American sovereign building. When they attack it and they kill our ambassador, any friendly conversation should end. So it's a rough issue. And this is one of the reasons I have a huge problem with people trying to make political statements in their films. It can be used to great effect. I think that Captain America: The Winter Soldier is one of the best movies I've seen in a long time. Because of, and you can actually listen to the Russo brothers talk about it, but they wrote all this stuff and then Snowden came out after they started filming. They were already done with the entire process and they're like, oh crap. That's cool. That's interesting how that came out, where it was a fictional thing and then it's real. But and this has been done, especially in sci-fi, a lot. Planet of the Apes did it with, nuclear disarmament. Oh, we need to get rid of the nukes and all that stuff in the 60s. And then Avatar did it with conservation, and so did WALL-E. And there's a lot of movies that make political statements, and they're not all bad. I'm not saying never make a political statement, but be careful. Because you know what? No matter what your opinions are, you might be a Democrat. And since I'm talking to a lot of filmmakers, I know that a lot of filmmakers and artsy types are very liberal. Because I think that we're perfectionists and we're idealists. We believe, if we just talk to people, then everything will be fine. Well, talking to people doesn't always work, okay? Can we talk to ISIS? No. ISIS cuts people's heads off and eats people's hearts, okay? ISIS is a bunch of raving maniacs rampaging across the Middle East, making a Muslim caliphate. That's what they've made. And we've done nothing about this roving band of maniacs. If it was a decision by all the Muslim states on there, Jordan and Iran and Iraq and everybody and Syria, and they all just said, hey, let's come together and we're going to make our little caliphate and we're going to have, this is the first, this is basically the Ottoman Empire back again. Sure. Absolutely. If it was everybody's decision, that's fine. But it wasn't everybody's decision. Someone took it upon themselves to conquer. We should be dealing with that. Somebody should be dealing with that. Other than just rocketing buildings that they post on Facebook. Hey, we're here. That's actually a story that happened. Someone posted on Facebook, hey, this is where we're staying. And then that building doesn't exist anymore. Because don't post strategic locations on Facebook, idiots. But I'm trying not to get political, but it's inevitable when you're talking about this, because political messages are everywhere. Even if you're not intending to, there's a political message in most films. There's a certain viewpoint that you see the world from, and that's going to color what you make. And if you're a liberal, I don't think you're a bad guy. I think you're fine. I am friends with liberals. I don't agree with a lot of the things that they think, but you know what? I'm still friends with them. I'm still friends with people who have a contrary viewpoint to mine. And that's possible. You can be friends with someone who isn't the same as you. We can't all agree on everything all the time. But maybe we don't vilify the other people. You know, when there's a person who's done something wrong, they should pay for it. Absolutely. Personally, I think Hillary should be in jail. That's my opinion. You know, and the crime that she committed was murder by not sending backup for Benghazi, and treason, actually, for refusing to follow the security protocols set forth by the American government. Those are the two things that she committed. Okay, it's not about her being a woman running for president. If there was a woman who shared ideals with me, who I thought would do a great job as a president, I would definitely vote for her. If there was a black man or a black woman who was running for president, who had some good ideas, I really wanted to vote for Ben Carson. I really wanted Carson in there. I wanted Carson or Cruz in there. That's who I wanted for our Republican candidate. That's who I wanted. But that didn't happen. Carson got out before I got a chance to vote, before the Missouri primary came up. You know? So it's... You don't always get what you want. You know? And I don't know. All I'm saying is we can't come together and we can't be unified as a country, as a people, if we keep vilifying each other. You know what? Liberals are not the devil. They're not the enemy. They have some very dangerous ideas, but they're not the enemy. If you're a liberal out there, I don't hate you. I don't think that you should die. I don't think that you should, not have a right to vote. You have a right to vote because you are an American. That's a right, as long as you aren't a criminal or or the list of things that we've all agreed on, for you to have a chance to vote. You get a chance to vote once in your state. You follow the rules and you vote. And I think it's very important that you do, because your opinion needs to be heard just as much as mine does. And whether you love Bernie or Hillary or Trump or Cruz or Carson or Kanye, who's running in 2020 apparently, that's going to be a fun election. If we've got Trump for re-election versus Kanye, we're going to have the guy who thinks he's God and the guy who thinks he's better than that. So it's going to be a fun political little thing. We need to be unified as a people. And if we keep dividing ourselves up along these lines, Christian, not Christian, because honestly, it seems like it's Christians versus everybody else. Everybody's coming after Christians, and it's not fun. Black versus white, Democrat versus Republican. It's not that. It's not black and white. It's not that simple. Okay? We need to rise above these issues and we need to work together. And I think that actually films like The Purge election year are damaging to that. And the controversy over Ghostbusters. If you have a dissenting opinion, if you say no, I don't want there to be a remake, then you're a misogynist and a racist. I'm not misogynist. I'm not racist. I love women and I love African Americans. I love black people as much as I love any other person. They're just people in my eyes. Why do we have to worry about color of skin or gender or any of this? And it's sad to me that we have to be this petty. When you're changing national policies, sure, we need to talk about this. But you know what? Movies are really important to me, really important to you, because you're listening to this. Movies are incredibly important. to us. But in the grand scheme of things, who's in what movie and all the money that a movie made and whether it was good or bad doesn't matter that much. I mean, there are some great movies that did wonderful things. There are movies that inspire people. Film is a great thing. But at the end of the day, it's the impact on people that matters. Not the box office or anything else. Honestly, if I had a film that didn't make a single cent, but inspired people to be better to each other, to be better to themselves, to just raise the human race above where it is right now, above all the chaos and ridiculous, petty, just squabbles that we have. If I had one film that could do anything close to that, and it didn't make a single cent, and I died poor, destitute, still living in my parents' basement, I'd be okay with that. I'd be happy. Good day, and good filmmaking.